How do you bridge the gap between leaders and those they are meant to lead? I was listening to a great book yesterday. This was a reread of Simon Sinek's Leaders Eat Last. A few key points really stood out to me, which perhaps hadn't before. Things like how the culture of an organization reflects on the character of the people, and how bad leaders breed bad cultures. And questions around trust, which is so important. Like, do you trust your leaders enough to be in the same foxhole as them? I thought from an organization standpoint, this all makes sense, right? He mentioned how typically in an organization you have all the leaders with all the authority, and then you have all the workers who have all the information. In corporate work that I've done in the past, this is very evident in some organizations, especially where it exists. It's blatant. And there are great people out there doing wonderful work in that space. If you don't know them, look up Cindy Monjani and Sergio Tijera, who really shine in that leadership space. Jason Shelfer is another one. He does great work with organizations in bridging that communication gap for this very thing. So fine, as far as organizations are concerned, we can all agree that it makes sense. Then I thought about parenting and how parents have all the authority, not grandparents, parents, and children are only trying to gather the information. And I love that about kids, that curiosity that they're born with. That if we as parents can embrace and breathe life into their curiosity, they'll always be curious, which makes life much more interesting. I know there still can be parents out there who are using the because I said so default answers to everything. At least I pray that there aren't. This is part of how kids learn and get the information that they'll need for adulthood, folks. Then you know me, I took it a step further and thought about our leaders. Well, I don't want to call them leaders because if most of who's sitting in Congress today are considered our leaders, we are in trouble. Let's call them our elected officials, okay? They have the authority, they do, but still they work for us. At least they're supposed to. They tend to forget it, but they're supposed to. It wouldn't be a problem that they had the authority if in fact we as Americans had the information. But unfortunately, we don't have the information. We are just not making the time to educate ourselves and stay informed. I mean with the truth. I know people are watching and they're going to say, well, I'm informed. I mean, I watch 4 hours of news a day. I'm going to humbly suggest that you're not informed, you're indoctrinated. No, that's not true. I watch channels, I switch between CNN and MSNBC and even Fox. They'll argue. You're not informed, you're indoctrinated. Mainstream is mainstream, and no one left has any journalistic integrity. They're editorialists at best, promoting the agenda of whoever signs their paychecks, selling whatever will get them the most ratings and the highest book sales. Congratulations, people. Their programming is succeeding in programming you into believing that you're informed, but you're not really. And guess what? If you think your kids are being educated in what's important in our country in school, think again. Bother to look into it. Even the texts they're learning from are skewed in favor of an agenda. Trust me. I graduated from high school 35 years ago. Actually, 36 years this year. I went to Gables High. Go Cavs! And I had a great teacher for American history. She was in that excitement of her first year of teaching, and she strayed just a tad from the textbook to teach us the truth on the subject of Native Americans. All the students loved her teaching, but somehow word got out, and she was actually reprimanded by her superior for not sticking to the script. Now, knowing her, I'm sure that she argued on our behalf that it was important to hear the truth, but they weren't having it. The following year, she was teaching health and babysitting detention. This was 36 years ago, people. And if you don't think it's not still happening today at an even greater level, I encourage you to think again. We must take control of educating our kids. I'll argue until I'm blue in the face, as would most of you, that history matters because if we don't learn from it, we're bound to repeat it. Now, for just a minute, I'm going to go back to what Sinek discussed in his book, and I gave it a little bit of a twist. The culture of our country reflects the character of our people. Is that accurately represented based on what you see in the news these days? I don't think so. Americans are amazing, giving, patriotic, and that's not what they show on the news. If bad leaders breed bad cultures, then we need to really study and look into our leadership, and I'm using that word very loosely, in Washington, D.C., to make sure that they are not breeding bad culture. But you know what? Right now, the way it stands, they totally are. We keep allowing them to broaden home plate to accommodate for their corruption and their greed and their immorality and their hypocrisy, and that bleeds into the culture, folks. And if you don't trust your elected official enough to be in the same foxhole with them, then it's time to make a change. Here's the kicker. Do you even know who represents you in your county, in your state, or in Washington? Think about that. If you don't know, the first step is to look them up. What districts are you in? Ask yourself, what are they doing? What did they promise? Are they representing me as their constituent? Or are they representing lobbyists or an agenda that doesn't serve our country? The way that you defeat the corruption in Washington is to be informed. Make a commitment to educate yourselves and what's really happening. I used to think it was a matter of apathy, but I think it isn't really. It's more sort of a matter of misinformation and biased information. That's the problem, that they're feeding us all the time. So if I can make a recommendation, and I promise you'll thank me for this later, go over to krisannehall.com, KrisAnnehall.com. I enrolled in their Liberty First University, mostly because I wanted to know if what I thought I knew was what I knew. And guess what? This has been the most valuable education I've ever received. Chris Ann and her husband JC do a great job of bringing truth, passionate, objective lessons where the only obvious subjectivity is their tremendous love for our country and for our Constitution. Now, I'm not affiliated with them or anything. So my only reason for telling you this is because the more educated and informed we are, the less likely we are to allow our elected officials and those with all the authority in our country to continue to crap all over the Constitution the way they're doing. I guarantee that if we, the people, were better informed, 75% of our current Congress would not win re-election. I believe we can have an entirely different looking Congress in just 2 election cycles. I really do. But the work starts today. So let's make a commitment to get informed, to get more involved in the political landscape of our country, from the most local commission seat to everyone in Washington. Okay? Now, I want you to remember that the most powerful tool we have against tyranny is education, but we can't be lazy about how we become educated. Have a great day.